To Mitch McConnell?
Yeah, Mitch McConnell.
Okay, we have Mitch McConnell speaking at a town hall. Let's take you there live right now. You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. I'm Nick Sertman.
The personnel business. And the single biggest decision I ever made when I was majority leader, and by the way, I've been both, majority is better, and that's because the majority leader gets to decide what you're going to do. And I decided in 2016 not to fill the Supreme Court vacancy when Justice Scalia passed away. Biggest decision I made in my entire career, but ended up having, I think, a very consequential impact, not only on the court, but on the country.
I think any observer, any historian would agree, certainly, with that statement, as far as some folks agreed with it, some folks did not, but,
Yeah.
but obviously it's consequential.
Yeah, I wasn't claiming it was universally applauded, but consequential.
As was pointed out, you served as party leader in the U.S. Senate longer than anyone else, 2006 to 2024. You've already reflected upon that one decision, but looking back over the highs and the lows of it all, any reflections at all on how your leadership tenure evolved and what you're most proud of?
I mean, in terms of accomplishment?
Yes.
Well, from a Kentucky point of view, I think probably the tobacco buyout was the most consequential thing I was involved in. To show you how much things changed, there was a tobacco quota, at least a handful of them, in 119 of 120 counties when I went to Washington. 100,000 allotments. I remember a few years before we did the buyout, I came out for it and got royally trashed by the Kentucky Farm Bureau. A couple of years later, they came and said, well, you know, maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. And I was in a position to put the buyout in an unrelated bill, and it happened. And from 2004 to 2014, people got a buyout. Why did it make sense? The government created the asset. You pay taxes on your farm. And so it seemed logical that your asset, if it was going to be destroyed, you get compensated for it. And we did it by putting taxes on tobacco. The final thing I'd say about that is I read a comment by a medical professional at UK who said he thought that it had a positive impact on reducing the number of people using tobacco, and it actually had a healthy impact on our state, because we've always been pretty high on these indexes of cancer. And it's sort of like if you work at the Corvette plant, you want to own the car, you can afford it. And people who grew tobacco thought, well, you know, I ought to be using it. So we've gone down now to about a couple of thousand growers who have big farms, and the government's not involved in the business.
Quick aside, and I was a reporter again in radio and TV beginning in the 90s in Louisville. When I heard, so when I was first covering you, the tobacco buyout was the biggest thing going on in the 90s then. And I did not realize I was more of an agricultural or rural background, you know, since I was new to town. But obviously you grew up in Louisville. How did a Louisville kid end up being so well-versed and leader in a agricultural issue?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Joe.
You're from Louisville, University of Louisville, and yet you became an agricultural senator in some respects. I mean, so I'm just curious how that, was that hard?
I was smart enough to go to law school at UK.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Early signs of political sagacity. The only thing would have been smarter would have been to go on to WKU.
All right, before we get to some other modern issues, I have to ask you, what's it like? We talked about your long leadership run. Do you enjoy not being in leadership now?
Well, let's put it this way. There's certain things I don't miss. Senator Gibbons is here. He's a leader in the state senate. Mike Wilson is. The thing about being in a leadership role is you kind of take the heat for everybody else. I used to be called the designated spear catcher. And, you know, your job is to try to help everybody succeed. And sometimes, actually a lot of times, that means taking the heat in order to protect your membership. I did that for 18 years. As was indicated, longer than anybody else. And that I don't miss. So what I've done here, and that's going to be the last 2 years of my career in the Senate, is focus on things that which leads me into making some observations about the situation we're in the world right now. This is an extremely dangerous world right now. We have 4 or 5 serious adversaries: China, Russia, Korea, Iran, and Iran's proxies. It looks an awful lot like the run-up to World War II. In addition to that, one of the big mistakes prior to World War II was something called the Smoot-Hawley tariff bill. We kicked off tariff wars. And that was widely considered a factor in taking the Depression worldwide. Does some of this sound familiar to you all?
Yes.
Yeah. The slogan during the 30s, America First, sound familiar? I'm skeptical about, on the tariff side, on kicking off tariff wars with your friends. Virtually everybody impacted by the back and forth on tariff are our allies. On the national security side, what we have to hope we will always avoid is a big headline that says Russia wins and America loses. Ukraine is extremely important to us. My dad was a foot soldier in World War II. It's a regular foot soldier. The war ended for him in Pilsen, which is now the Czech Republic, where they met the Russians. And I have letters he wrote to my mother saying, I think we're going to have a problem with the Russians. This is a regular foot soldier predicting what has exactly happened. And the Russians have been a problem, not just up until the Berlin Wall came down, but since then. And they're aligned and communicating with each other. They're not operating all by themselves. It's China, Russia, North Korea, Iran and Iran's proxies communicating. They want to replace us as the international force that we are, that, in my opinion, argues not for isolation. And the final point I'd make, if some of you think, well, why are we spending money in Ukraine? Let me give you a little financial advice about money well spent. During World War II, 37% of our GDP was spent on defense. 37%. In Korea, 13%, in Vietnam, 9%. The Reagan buildup, he built up defense, was only 6% of gross domestic product. So you can see it's a lot cheaper to prevent a war than to have one. And a hell of a lot less people get killed. And right now, we need to be showing strength and determination, not weakness. And that's one way in which I'm not exactly aligned. I think the president's trying to figure out which one of these two models he wants to be. I'm pulling for the latter. And on the trade front, that's a loser as well. I read an article in the Herald Leader about 3 weeks ago about a study looking at trade by state. And they ranked the states based on their state's gross domestic product. Kentucky was the most trade dependent of the 50 states based on your state's GDP. We were number 1 in imports and number 3 in exports and number 1 in the country. So I'm hoping this is going to stop soon, because I do not think it will have a healthy outcome for our country. And the final point I'd make is, you heard discussion about who pays for it. You do. You do. So it's inflationary as well. Other than that, I don't feel strongly about it.
I do want to follow up back to defense for a moment, because you pointed out, as you know, that you were in the final stretch, the last 2 years of your long career. But instead of just taking a back seat, you were the chair of the subcommittee on defense appropriations. You already talked about why this is so strong. Did you take that position or advocate for it because you wanted to have that significant role?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I don't have to take arrows for everybody now. So what I decided to focus on, first of all, was defense and foreign policy. The subcommittee of appropriations actually writes the checks, and we're not doing that as well as we should. The Biden administration never recommended a budget that even kept up with inflation. And regretfully, this one that we ended up sort of passing this year is not great either. So trying to advocate and lobby for, in effect, avoiding the inevitable if we don't. Look, the way you get respect is to have your enemies not want to mess with you. It's not complicated. You know, they don't pick a fight with you if they don't think they're going to win it. And that's what Reagan did. Reagan did so many things successfully. He was, by the way, a free trader. Great tax leveler. If you want to look at how government right of center can really work, look at the Reagan administration. Almost everything they did turned out well, which is why he's looked back on with so much reverence. even by those who were not fans of his at the time.
One more follow-up on Ukraine, and that is, you actually went to Kyiv. You met with Volodymyr Zelensky. You were there in person, and after the war, broke out, does that make a difference to you that as you see now the footage of the bombings and things, that you can personally see yourself
well,
there?
it's inspirational. These people are fighting for their country, and you're right. I went in 2 months after the Russians did, and with a different intent, of course. And Reagan, if you think about it, we're not in the fight ourselves. We're just helping a democratic country avoid being taken over by authoritarians. Reagan would turn over in his grave if he knew that we were reluctant to send money to help somebody beat the Russians. And that's still true today. The Russians are up to no good. And no amount of acting like we want to be their friend is going to change that. What they respect is strength. And we had an opportunity here to help Ukraine with its independence. Now, here's the good news about helping Ukraine. 38 states, including our own, are benefiting from that because of the equipment that's being manufactured, all coming from our country. So we're helping these people defend themselves, and we're creating American jobs all at the same time. So to me, this is the most important thing going on right now in the world, and I want to play some role in that.
Okay, brace yourself. One big, beautiful bill. Let's talk about the legislation. The House has just passed it by, what, 1 vote? So before I ask you any prognostication, would you mind, because there's no one who knows more about the process of the U.S. Senate than you do.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what hurdles does this have to clear? Can you just explain this as a history teacher first, parliamentarian and things like that? I mean, what happens here?
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated to explain, but there's one really important thing you can do that gets around the Senate filibuster. It's called reconciliation, and it's never used except when you have the entire government of your party, which we do right now, and which they've done as well. You would think that was easy, but it's not. Just getting all of your own people in the wagon is quite a challenge, and you saw that in the House last week. That bill will come over to us, and it does have lots of different things in it. It comes over to us, and we have a thing called the Byrd Rule, and the Byrd Rule means the parliamentarian gets to decide what's eligible and what isn't. What's eligible and what isn't. And so we are crafting a different version in consultation with the parliamentarian to see what we'll say in it. I'll make a couple of predictions. Number one, I think the 2017 tax bill will continue. That means that individual rates will join corporate rates as being permanent. Now, permanent in Washington means until the other guys win. But it is easier to avoid them going away automatically, because then you'd have to, I mean, for example, the parts of the 2017 tax bill that expire will be a huge tax increase. So I think that's likely to come out of all this. Other things will be not quite as significant and will be extremely difficult to get together in the Senate, and it won't be the same as the House. So then we'll have to go to conference and see what happens. Obviously, the Speaker wants the bill to be really close to his, because it wasn't a cakewalk passing it. Sorry for that lengthy explanation, but this will be the single biggest bill of the Trump administration domestically of the whole 4 years. And it was for Biden as well.
Right.
And they had a different view of how to use it, and used it not once but twice to, in my view, and I think the view of most economists, create quite an inflationary spiral.
Yeah, the $2 trillion American Rescue Plan.
Well,
Was
you
the
know,
result of that, right?
Bill Clinton's Secretary of the Treasurer, Larry Summers, told the Democrats at the time, in March of 21, you do this and you're going to have 40-year inflation. They did it, and we did. So they took a different approach. The Democrats look at this and say, why did you cut all these taxes in the first place? Because we think it created more deficit problems. Well, it paid for itself. The reason we have the kind of deficit we do is that most of what we spend, we don't even vote on. They're called entitlements, and they are extremely popular. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, something David and Jim are concerned about how that plays out in terms of the impact that they have on the state budget. So step back and look at the picture. All of this argument is over 28% of what we spend, because that's all we vote on. Entitlement means you don't have to do anything to reauthorize it. It just goes. And these entitlements are enormously popular, and huge numbers of people depend on them. But that's what's driving the deficit. For example, and the older I get, the better I like this, we're all living longer. And you have fewer people paying in and a greater number of people paying out. I don't exaggerate when I tell you, I signed a letter to somebody congratulating them on their 100th birthday routinely every month around our state. So I'm not complaining about living longer. I'm just saying we haven't adjusted these, and the reason we haven't adjusted it is because they're extremely popular. The last adjustment of Social Security was Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. Believe it or not, that was even before I got there, which is a long time ago. And what they did was raise the age for Social Security from 65 to 67. It kicks in over several decades. We haven't done anything like that since. Sorry for all the lengthy explanation, but the deficit is primarily driven by things that are enormously popular. And when you see us voting on spending, we're playing around with 28% of what we're spending.
I should mention that from the co-op perspective, since we're here in this area, Congressman Guthrie has been a tremendous asset on the Energy and Commerce Committee on the energy front. But since you just mentioned Medicare and Medicaid, it seems to me that
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Brett is in a very, very good position. The Energy and Commerce Committee in the House is really, really important, and we're fortunate, in particular me no longer being in the leadership in the Senate, we're really fortunate to have Brett in such a key position. And he'll be wrestling with this Medicaid issue that you guys are understandably apprehensive about.
Before we go, at each table, there's a flyer there about the new book on your career by Mike Tackett, the Associated Press reporter, who, by the way, was not, you didn't hire him to do this. This is his own independent project. So now that the book is out and it's independent, you cooperated. What do you think about the book?
Yeah, well, it's something about it. I'm not selling books here, but I want to tell you how this came about. This guy that I never heard of came into my office 3.5 years ago and said he was going to do a book about my life and career. I thought about that a minute, and here's what I said. I said, you won't have any trouble finding my enemies. But I'd like to give you a chance to meet some of my friends and people who might have liked what I did. And so I decided cooperating was a better approach. But I didn't know what he was out to do. I think in the end, it's balanced. I don't think he liked everything I did, but at this stage, you know, the most I could hope for is that somebody objectively took a look. And it's been out a couple of months, but it's about as fair as you can get. He obviously didn't agree with me on the Supreme Court.
With that, please join me in thanking Leader Mitch McConnell.
You're watching Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. We're at the top of the hour. It's 2:01.